Hello everybody, happy Thursday. We are going live today with Rachel Tuchman to talk about Yom Tov prep from an emotional perspective. So we're just going to wait for some of you to show up and for Rachel, and we'll get right to it. We have a lot to cover and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Hey Rachel, let me invite you. Let's see how to do that. I think I invited you before you requested, so let's see if that works. Hey Rachel.
Hey. Hi.
Hi, so nice to see you. I think this is like a first for us.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done this before.
I know. I'm honored. Thank you so much for being so prompt and fast and on board.
Okay, no problem.
Alrighty, so we have so many things. First of all, thank you to both of our communities for being so open and willing and trusting us to address their concerns. I kind of organized it into spirituality, relationships, and specific mental health struggles because I felt like that was kind of the three overarching things.
Yeah.
Did you kind of agreed with that structure? You're okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so do you want to start? I think we should start with the spirituality piece just because that's what makes this live different because we're doing it at this time.
Yeah.
So one of the first things was how to reframe Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur from fear-based to love-based.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to give a little disclaimer here that anything that I am saying with regards to this is really, I'm not speaking from a halachic, no Jewish law, not even, I'm not a rabbi. I haven't even consulted with a rabbi in this. This is just from my own, I have consulted with a rabbi on similar things to this, but this is really just my own view of how we can view religion in a healthy way and our connection with spirituality and whatever in a healthier way. Anything I'm saying here, I don't want anyone in the comments what's the source for that? This is Rachel's view on mental health and religion. And again, the religion that I practice would be very much in line and accepting with anything I'm saying here.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that disclaimer.
I love the disclaimer, and I think there's no shortage of people getting religious values and perspectives from Torah sources and from rabbis. And I think what makes this unique is that we're getting it from a mental health perspective, and then people can do their diligence and checking if that's okay for them. But this is why we want to have this conversation.
Yeah, right. Okay, so wait, remind me the question again.
So how do we reframe, or how would you reframe Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur from fear-based to love-based? Because I think that as people age or as we get older, we start to have this fear versus oh, it's a holiday, it's Yom Tov, and we're off from school or work. It becomes no, this is a scary time.
Right. Okay. Right. So I often think about for myself, and I actually really want to give credit to my husband for teaching me this. Mm-hmm. I always say when we got married, he would be what religion are you practicing? Because the way that I viewed hardship in life and just religion in general was so fire and brimstone. God hates me. Wow. I'm such a bad person. Yeah. And he would be I thought you were Jewish. I don't understand. Where is this from? Yeah. And so I really credit him a lot for teaching me a much healthier approach to my relationship with God and with spirituality and Jewish observance in general. So that I just want to put that out there. I like to view religion. I think this is a healthier perspective. And it's something that we're actually taught as a parent-child relationship. And if you are a parent, or even if you're not, if you want to be a parent, or if you have parents who are healthy or unhealthy, you can understand this. Just like with our children, we want them to feel safe and loved. And if they make a mistake, we want them to be able to come to us and talk about it and not feel like we're going to beat them up or reject them or hate them or feel embarrassed by them or ashamed. And that we always want them to come to us because that is a relationship. Mm-hmm. I like to view religion and God in the same way. And so just Rosh Hashanah, I know that a lot of what we're taught about in the Jewish New Year is oh my God, 10 days of repentance, your year is being determined right now, you better do it right or you're going to have a really rough time this year. Mm-hmm. I get the intention behind that messaging because, we want people to be introspecting, but I say, wouldn't it be more helpful and probably, I think, have a better outcome that people might actually stick to a lot of what they want if we had more loving framing for this conversation, right? It's not if you don't do it, God's going to really mess with you and you're going to have a horrible year, right? What kind of parent does that? If I'm not happy with you, I'm going to punish you.
Right.
I understand that there are parents that do that, but again, that's not a loving relationship with a parent.
Exactly.
So we want to instead, I think, come from a place of God wants me to do this for me. My parents want me to do well socially, academically, whatever, for myself, not because they're going to be embarrassed or they're going to hate me if I don't do it. It's because they really care and love about me. So if I want to make changes this year, it's not because I'm terrified that if I don't, I'm not going to find that person to marry, or I'm not going to do well financially, or I'm still going to have my fertility struggle, or I'm going to lose my job. I want to do it because it makes me feel more connected and grounded in my observance, in my parenting, and my relationship, because I see a benefit to it. So I think if we switch it from how do I view a healthy parent-child relationship, that's my relationship with God. He's not doing it for himself. He wants it for me. God wants this for me. He, whatever your higher power, he, she, however you want to view God, they want it to be about me. So I think that's a huge shift, that we say it's not about God to make my life difficult and punish me. It's about God wanting me to be connected so that I can feel better within myself. Again, just like we want the best for our kids so that they have the best chance in life and that they are happy and fulfilled. It shouldn't be about our honor and our kavod. I like to view it in the same way. So I think that's important, switching to that healthy parent-child. And again, if you're a parent that's trying to be, a respectful, loving, gentle parent, even more so you'll understand how maybe some of that guilt and shame thinking is really disconnecting and not helpful.
I love it. I think a lot of our fear comes from our childhood when we're taught about it, and I think it's from old generations where they were on that level of that fear. I think that the content I listen to today is all about we need to God wants us to love him and he loves us, and should totally come from love and not fear. God is not that. Those generations could relate to God in that way. Our generation is not on that level, and that's not the kind of perspective we should be having. Is that something similar to something that you've I mean, it sounds like we're saying the same kind of thing, but that's kind of helps me, it grounds me. It's not from a fear perspective. It's through it's true love.
Yeah, we're not looking at for a trauma-based attachment here. We're looking for a secure, loving attachment.
Yeah,
and again,
I love that.
I think that's what we have to look at. What is a healthy way for me to interact with God? Even thinking about it again, even with a spouse, if you don't have children, or again with friends, do I want to be friends with someone who's if you don't call me at X time every day, forget it, our friendship is over. You might call them, but you're calling out of fear and out of oh my God, I don't want to lose you, versus wanting to actually connect,
Exactly. And if that friend was healthy, they wouldn't want that. They would be no, that's not the relationship I want. If they were a healthy individual, meaning, so God doesn't want that from us. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that kind of sums up the second point, which was how to deal with anxiety regarding judgment and punishment and fear of bad things happening or being decided. I think that's kind of from a clinical perspective, that's classic anxiety and not about the reality of this time of year necessarily. Would that be accurate?
And I think that there's just, some misguided, ideas again about how we're supposed to operate in this world, and the whole idea of reward and punishment. And, again, I think just thinking if I were thinking of myself as a child in a relationship with a parent, or I am a parent with this child, do I want to believe that if I mess up that I'm screwed for life? And the answer is no, especially if we believe that God is all loving. And we talk about those Yud Gimel Midot, right? That's what we talk about on Yom Kippur. Exactly. Compassion, love, kindness, anything but cruel and looking to punish you. Exactly. Remember that, that's what it is. We have a loving relationship. We read Shir HaShirim, right? It's a love story between us and God. We're not in an abusive relationship with him. And I think that's important to remember, that all of those fears come from, I think, misguided education, that we used to have the mentality that the way you keep people out of trouble is by scaring them, threatening them. But we understand that does not work. And that if we want real loving connection, we have to come from a place of compassion and love and gentleness and respect.
I love it. I love it. Amazing. So I think we kind of square that away on on some level. The next topic, major topic, which has a lot under it, is relationships. So I think so many of the questions were about how do I get along with difficult family members? Some people name them toxic. Some people said even just not toxic, even just being around so many people. Some people have social anxiety. Some people are just so overwhelmed about the whole idea of being with so many people and preparing for all that. So how do you want to address that piece?
Okay, so that's where I would say this book over here,
Yeah.
You guys haven't read it, from Nedra
Okay.
Taleb.
I want to set boundaries, find peace.
Yeah. If you haven't heard about this book,
I haven't.
Okay. Are you living under a rock, Faye?
Probably. I always say I'm living under a rock, honestly. I always say that.
I mean, you follow her. Do you follow her on Instagram?
Who is it?
Nedra? You don't follow Nedra? Stop.
I don't know.
Okay, Faye, I'm not judging. I'm coming with compassion.
Please,
you must follow her.
You can judge me. I always say, like, you judge me. As long as I don't judge myself, we're okay.
Okay, I really am judging you. You need to follow her. She's amazing.
Set boundaries, find peace, yeah?
Yes, this book. So
okay.
A lot of like her content is really in this book. She expands on it a little bit, but boundaries are huge. Know what makes sense for you. So if spending a 3-day holiday in your parents' home or at your sister's house or is not going to work for you, you can set a boundary of, you know, let's say you live close by to your parents. I'm actually going to stay in my apartment, but I'll walk over for, you know, or this year I'm actually going to a friend for the holidays. You could set that boundary. And I'm sure for some of you, by the way, when I say that, you're like, no, I cannot say that. My parents will flip out. And so then we have to, like, that's a whole separate level of like dealing with that fear of their disappointment and like not having, you know, your own like autonomy to make decisions for yourself in your life and dealing with people's disappointments and whatever. But you can set those boundaries. You can also, if you don't have a choice and, you know, your 90-year-old grandmother is going to be there. So like you can't not go because, you know, thank God she's 90 and every holiday with her is so precious. Then you say, I'm going to set the boundary of after meals. Like I go for a walk. I make sure that I have time for myself. I bring a book. I decide what conversations I'm not going to engage in. And I have a mental script already of what happens when my mother says, you really need to like try harder in the dating scene. Like you're really not. I feel like you're not giving it your all. You can have an answer already mentally prepped of, Ma, I hear you so much. Thank you so much for your concern, but I'm really not going to talk about this with you over the holiday. I want to have like a nice time here and we're just not going to agree. So let's just not talk about it. Right? Just understanding like, I already know, and you guys know this already. You know what topics come up when you're with your family. Nothing is surprising. So knowing already what conversations are going to be approached and what is your response going to be in order to set that boundary so that you are protected and okay and so that you can have your peace.
Correct. It might not even be a conversation. It might be it might just be a person that triggers you, just like seeing that person. So like, I think that's a piece, like you said, you know your boundaries, but like, I think that maybe a good idea, and I'm thinking of this like out loud, is to have a time before the holidays start, before you're together, and really sit down and reflect for 20 minutes with a pen and a paper or your notes on your phone and like think about what are my triggers. Like, is it seeing this person? Is it this conversation that might come up? Is it that conversation? And like you said, then using this book to set boundaries or using your skills, whatever those may be, to create that like space for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And also understanding that like someone can trigger you, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be in the same room or that you can't stand that, as long as you're acknowledging it. And again, I think sometimes when we're like, you know, I can't stand being around my sister, like automatically we'll be like, it's like so messed up that you think that way. Like, oh my God, am I the only one that can't stand my sister? And the answer is, you're not the only one, and it's okay if your sister triggers you, and just don't shame yourself. Again, shame is like never the answer. Shame puts us in a place where we cannot move forward. It puts us in this state of like frozenness of, I can't cope, I can't think, I can't. Instead, compassion. You know what? I have a complicated relationship with her. For whatever reason, I get these feelings when I'm around her, and it's okay. And if I need to take space and it's hard for me to be at the meal with her, I can eat. And like I said, go for a walk and visit my friend in the afternoon. I know I have friends that live nearby. That's what I'm going to do. So kind of have a plan to be able to, you know, take care of yourself.
But I love what you said, like so nonchalantly, like you don't need to avoid the trigger, meaning like just because someone triggers you, you don't have to judge yourself for it, but at the same time, you don't have to run from it. You can create a space or boundary around it and be prepared, be proactive. So I think that's
I think that's important because we live in a time, by the way, where we are actually like being told constantly to avoid our trigger. Like, someone cut them off. You don't want to read that? Unfollow it. You don't agree with them? Like, they're disgusting. And it's like,
everything's toxic or non-toxic. Everything.
Yeah, like good or bad. Black and white thinking. Like, you can't say something because you might offend someone. And it's like, we've taken away all personal responsibility from people. And I want to say, yes, sometimes we need a boundary of not being around certain things or not reading certain things. Sometimes we do need that. But then other times we have to really look and say, is there a way that practically I can manage this, even though I'll be uncomfortable? Can I manage this? And can I deal with this trigger instead of, like I said, cutting it off?
Right.
Oh, I'm not speaking to that person. They voted for that president. Like, forget it. I'm not going to their house anymore. Guys, there is room for understanding different perspectives and even not feeling good about someone, but still being able to be in the room with them.
Exactly. I love that. Totally agree with that. I had something on my head, but I forgot, so it will come to me. Okay, so did we cover, let's say, like a lot of like parental conflict came up, divorced parents? It sounds like the questions were, again, this was my understanding, that it was coming from people living at home. So like either an older single or even like teenagers living at home with parental conflict or divorced parents. Anything, I mean, I think everything we said applies to that, but I'm wondering if there's anything additional that you want to add to that piece.
Yeah. So I think that the first thing with that is just like I was saying before, just be good to yourself, have compassion for yourself, understand that if you have parents that are divorced or separated or going through a hard time where it's tense in the house, or you yourself are even divorced and you're away from your kids, just be good to yourself. Acknowledge that this is a challenge and it's hard, and maybe even it feels unfair and it's not right. I wish this wasn't my reality. And then do things to, like I said, be good to yourself. Get yourself a book to read over the holiday. Buy your favorite whatever to have in the house.
Set boundaries, find peace, because otherwise you're going to be like shamed by Rachel.
And judged. You don't know it and that you don't follow her. Like your life is missing something important.
Well, so that's why I'm having this live. Like this is all an endeavor for like personal growth and selfish reasons.
Okay. If you were following her, you wouldn't need this live.
I wouldn't need this live. Okay.
Right. So also knowing that you're not alone, knowing that like it's okay, knowing that other people, like you are not the only person in the world. And I think this is important. Like Mark Manson has a book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Yeah, that book I read.
But that book, he actually says a line in there that I actually use a lot in my sessions, and I love it so much. But he says in there, basically one of the ideas he says like, you're not special. You're special, but you're not special, meaning your problems are not unique, right? Everybody goes through these things. There's no problem in the world that's never been heard of before. Correct. So there are so many people that are navigating this difficult dynamic, that are also alone, that don't have their kids, that you're not the only one. So I don't want you to think like I'm the only loser that doesn't have my kids. I'm the only one that's divorced and I didn't want to be divorced. I'm the only one that, hates my family. I'm the only one that can't stand You're not the only one. There are so many people that are in the same place as you, and it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. That doesn't make it better, but it just means you're not the only one. There's nothing wrong.
Right. You're not afraid.
This is just the reality. There are people that are going through the same thing. And so I think that's important. I think also rethinking expectations. I think society has very high standards, I guess, for holidays. Like like you go on social media and everyone's tablescaping and amazing menus and like beautiful, they're having this one and that one. And you're kind of like, I don't tablescape. I'm not making any of those things. Like my holiday is like so stressful. And so we feel even worse. And I would say maybe that's something just to think about also, that maybe social media pre-holiday time is like not the best place for you to be, or if you are, to be very aware that you switch into that comparison mode and that it feels very hard for you. And again, like when we see pictures of holidays in media, it's always like happy family passing the drink to the other one. Right. That's not always the reality of it. Like whenever you're with family, it's complicated, and it could be joyful, but it could also be really tough. So just rethinking your expectations about how your holiday should look, what is like the best way for everyone to be happy, including yourself. I think that's important. And then I think again, connecting with people, reaching out. If, like I said, if you're going home to your family, if another friend is going to be at their family, reach out, connect with them, talk to other people even beforehand if they're not going to be around, and just kind of have like that support of like, oh my God, I'm going home and I'm going to have to deal with this thing and that. You too? Okay, amazing. And again, hearing that you're not alone, that's important.
Yeah, and filling up that like tank, like as you're talking, I'm thinking like, if you're not going to necessarily be next to the people that you love over the holiday, or the people that support you, speaking to them before and like filling up that like relational tank, that healthy relationship tank, can get you like through those days. And also I think that's something that I tell myself sometimes is like the anticipation anxiety is always worse. So like you need to take care of yourself now, like these days before, which is like why we're doing this live and why so much of our content is geared towards this.
because most likely whatever you're anticipating being so terrible, it's much worse in the anticipation of it than when you're actually going through it. Not to say that it won't be hard, but really to recognize that usually it's a lot worse in anticipation, and therefore take care of yourself through this time and prepare for the actual situation.
Yeah, and I think that even goes in line with rethinking your expectations. If you expect that you're going to go home and your family is not going to bother you and it's going to be a great holiday and everyone's going to get along, or that you're going to go home and it's going to be terrible, that's something to look at. Like, can I just find like a middle ground where either I'm expecting nothing, so whatever happens is like, oh, that wasn't so bad, or if I'm expecting so much, I'm going to just like bring that bar down a little bit and be a little bit more realistic, and even be okay with, I might feel unhappy, but I also might be okay a lot of the time, or some of the time. And I think that, again, like
neutralizing the expectation.
Yeah.
Right. Not going to any of the extremes. I think that's an amazing point. Totally. What else did I have over here? Okay. There was a question about, like, I thought it was a good question, like how and when to respond to hurtful comments versus accepting that you can change others. I didn't think that it was like an either or. I think that we all should accept that we cannot change others. And the question is really how and when to respond to hurtful comments. And I think that circles back to like the boundaries. I think that sometimes there is a time and place. I'm wondering if you have any like good formula for people. Because I think it's a very common question and something I could see myself like running into even, like, do I say something or do I just let it slide? For sure you can change people, but do you say something to protect your own, like yourself, and to create a boundary? Or do you?
So I think that's important, because I think that question just shows that sometimes people think setting boundaries is like changing other people. Setting boundaries is letting people know how I'm going to show up. I'm not controlling you. You can say whatever you want. I'm going to let you know how I'm going to respond to that. So I think that there's that difference. Like, I'm not trying to change you, but I'm going to let you know that if you bring up my dating life or my marriage or my kids or my weight or any of that, I'm going to tell you, I'm not comfortable speaking about that with you. Please don't ask me about that. And then I'm going to hold the boundary of, I'm not talking about it. That's it. I'm not going to let you push and push and push. And then I'm finally going to be like, oh, okay, fine. Like, whatever. I'm going to hold that boundary. I'm going to hold the boundary, and I'm going to say, again, respectfully, you know, and again, assertively, like, I'm actually not willing to talk about that with you, or it makes me feel uncomfortable when you say, or please don't make those kind of comments to my child. Like, I'm going to speak up. I think that sometimes, and again, I can't tell you when someone says this, then apply the boundary. You have to know. You are the expert of your family. You'll know what battles to choose. Sometimes a boundary means I'm just ignoring it. I'm not even engaging with it, and I am letting it go. Sometimes a boundary means I need to actually explicitly state right now that this is how I'm going to show up in response to what you just said or did. It depends. You have to, it's like a case by case.
It's art. It's not a science.
Know who you're dealing with. So you're going to have to be the judge of that. So I can't let you know, like, when, XYZ means you respond in this way. You're going to have to decide in each moment what is worth your energy and what's going to be most effective. Like, if I say something, is this just going to spiral, or is this something I could just let go and it'll kind of go away? Is it even worth it over the 3-day holiday here? Is it worth it for me to get into this, or could I just be like, okay, and move on? You're going to have to decide,
Totally. That makes sense. So I think the formula is you have to create your own formula and like decide. And it's a case by case. Like, you can be proactive, but at this end of the day, like, you're not in control of other people. So you never know what's going to come up, but you can kind of have in your mind, like, okay, if something's addressed that, let's say about my dating life or about my weight, like, those are the things I might respond to and create that type of verbal boundary. Whereas other type of comments that might annoy me, I'm going to let those slide. Every person for themselves can create that kind of formula or something like that.
Or even dating comments or weight comments, I might not have a verbal boundary. I might just smile and say, and not respond, and that could be enough. But again, you have to know, who am I dealing with? Is it worth it? Is it going to continue and push things worse or blow the tent fight? It's not worth it for me for 3 days. Like, I'm going to go home and I'm not coming back until Thanksgiving or Hanukkah, or, so kind of understanding, like, is it important to me right now in this moment? Do I need to stand on principle? Do I need to say something? It might be, and it might not be. And you're the one that has to decide that. I can't say, you can't make a blanket statement.
For sure. Okay, next topic that came up under this was loneliness.
Okay, yeah.
So I think, again, we addressed these a little bit. I just want to know if there's any, because so many people ask these questions in different ways, like specifically loneliness as an older single, as a single parent, as a divorced, whatever it is, or separated or something, or even amongst people, but feeling lonely. So like, how would you address that as a specific issue, if at all different than we just discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I would add to that is just remembering that like loneliness is a feeling, right? It's not an actual state of being. So you could be surrounded, you could be married, you could have kids, you could be, and you could still be very lonely. So I would say even just kind of looking at the loneliness, like loneliness is telling us that we need something, and it depends what that is. Again, it's not, I need people around me. There are people that have people around them that are loneliness.
Correct.
So, that experience, loneliness. So kind of just like getting curious about that
What's
feeling.
the loneliness? Like, what's the texture of it? Right.
And
So
what am I telling myself about being single and like not having a family on the holidays? Like, there are people that are single and don't have family on the holidays and don't feel lonely. So just kind of questioning, what's my narrative about my current situation that's making me feel this way? What's my connection with the people around me that I have a million people around me and I feel very lonely and unfulfilled?
Right. Like, what's that telling me about my relationships? Something nice I heard is like the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is like when we feel really weak by ourselves, whereas solitude is where we find strength by ourselves. Sometimes we just like blink it, our feeling alone for a second as loneliness, versus like, can you, like, kind of like you said, get into that texture of it? Is it really loneliness, or is it solitude and I'm just really not comfortable in the space of like being alone for a bit and having that space of solitude and getting to know myself or being with my thoughts? So like, I think people are just really quick to like go to loneliness because it's like that feared feeling. And like you said, we create a narrative around it that's usually negative, but really getting curious about it and like seeing if over the holiday you could find space for some solitude, because I think that's like so important for mental health, like to be alone and to feel okay with that, being alone in that way, and enjoy it and find strength in it. I think that's like a growth and something that you could come to enjoy. So like that piece, I would tell people that are afraid of being lonely, see if you could tap into solitude, but also, like you said, get curious about the loneliness. Like, what is it telling you about your life, your relationships, things like that?
Yeah. And your beliefs, I guess, about like what it means if you're not always with people, like
exactly.
I think we should all kind of have moments where we're comfortable just like being by ourselves. And again, it doesn't mean if you're single and you're alone all the time that you have to get comfortable with it. I want to validate that is really hard, especially in our community when holidays, everything is about family, but especially holidays. And if you don't have, or you're not married, or it's really isolating. But even then, again, it's kind of challenging. Like, what is my community? What is my society making me believe about my current disposition? And can I try to connect with people and feel differently about it, and kind of stop shaming myself, like layering upon layer, of all of these beliefs that I have about my current disposition,
Correct. Yeah, totally. So I'm happy we addressed that. I think that's like helpful, even if we don't have like answers, like there's no answers to these, but just like addressing them. I feel like people were so generous, and I'm so like grateful that people were so sharing about their issues. And I wanted just them to know that I really tried hard, and we're trying hard to like address everything a bit. How to be empathic for others and not get pulled down. I think this is another thing that will come up a lot on the holiday for people. Like how, if somebody in the family is struggling emotionally, mentally, physically, and you want to be there for them and be empathic, but then that pulls you down. What's that? Again, I'm sure it comes back to boundaries. I'm also thinking containment. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, well, so there's a difference between empathy and then like literally putting yourself in someone's shoes and taking their burden off them and putting it on yourself, right? Empathy is like, you can imagine what that's like. Like I could understand that. And then taking on the burden is saying, oh, it is my problem now, right? And so I think that we need to differentiate. Like I can feel empathy for you and want to support you and feel sad, but then not let it become my problem, because it's not my problem. And I think it's important to remember that when we make other people's problems our problems, we actually disempower them. And we tell them like, I don't have faith in you that you can handle this. And we don't want to do that. We want to give people, I think, the support and the belief that like, oh my gosh, this, that validation, this is so hard. And I'm so sorry you're going through this. I want to support you. How can I support you? Not by taking away your problem, but by listening or by believing in you, or by, dropping off like a, coffee by you or whatever it is. Don't take people's problems on as your own, because again, it sends a message of, I don't have faith in you that you can handle it. So
but you even, like you said about empathy, like that, like having that empathy that could make you feel sad for the person, right? So I think that that's also the question, meaning, so like I think what you addressed is also not taking on that burden, which of course, like granted, and a lot of times we can't take on the person's burden, right? Like if they're struggling with depression, we can't say like, I'll take the depression for you, right? But like just feeling that, like having that pull a person down, I'm wondering like if there's anything that we can suggest. I'm thinking like I said, containment, like containing, like you're there for that person, and then you know that you shelf it, kind of like you're healthy enough to then say like, I'm going to hear the pain and I'm going to be there for them in that pain, but then I put it on a shelf kind of, and I try to enjoy the rest of my holiday or the rest of the day. You get what I'm differentiating here?
I think it's really hard to do that, to say like, oh, I'm so sad and now I'm going to put it away. I think maybe just say like, I feel really sad about this. And then even acknowledging that it's even hard to let go of that sadness and that you have a pull to fix. And then I would ask, why do you have that pull to fix? Maybe even getting curious about that. Why am I so uncomfortable with someone suffering that I need to fix it? Right. That's why we become therapists, because that's like our go-to. That's our MO. We're always like trying to fix and fix and fix and fix until you learn as a therapist, that's not your job. But I think most people that go into the field, that's why we do it. We were fixers in our own lives, or people didn't fix for us, so we need to fix. So I say that maybe even get curious about that. Why is it scaring me that someone's suffering and I can't make it better? It's not my job. Suffering is part of life, unfortunately. Pain is part of life. And I can't stop whatever's happening to this person, but I can just be there with them so that they're not alone. And I think that's a huge thing that people don't realize, that connection, even if the problem doesn't go away, connection can be something that strengthens someone, that lessens the pain so that they're not suffering. The pain is still there, but they're not suffering anymore, you know? And so understanding that that is so valuable. Our job is not to stop the problem or remove it or fix it. It's to just be there with that person in whatever way that you can. You know, so acknowledging the sadness, letting the sadness be there, and even saying to yourself, like, wow, this is really affecting me right now. Like, what is it that feels so scary for me about someone being in a bad position, that I feel so helpless right now and out of control? And that's, you know, if you're in therapy, mentally jot it down to talk about after the holiday, you know, in your next session.
Yeah, totally. But I like what you said, like really knowing that, like, even you being for that person is the best help that you can give them, meaning being for them, being there with them in that moment, in that pain, you know, and there's nothing, you don't have to do more. But I appreciate that perspective also, like the real acceptance piece and like acknowledgement of like, this is sad, this is hard for me. And then jotting down to explore that, or like making a mental note of that. All right. We still have a few minutes, right? We can still go.
I don't know.
Still have some time. It's 1:32. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We can do one more.
Okay, amazing. So the next section is the specific mental health struggles. There are a couple, but I think that what we should go into, since this is something you speak about so much, is like the eating disorders, disordered eating, body image issues. Because that was like a lot that came up. It was like from, you know, restrictive eating. I definitely want you to make a clear disclaimer about like fasting and not fasting. So there was a whole spectrum from disordered eating, to restrictive, to binge eating. And then a lot of body image issues that came up as well, fearing being with family that will make comments. But I think we addressed the comments piece earlier. So really just like, I want to focus, this is like personal mental health struggles that people asked about.
Right. So I think that, again, this is going to be where boundaries are very important. Understand, again, I don't think when anyone goes into these holidays that there's like any surprises. Like you already know what are like the buttons that your family members push with you, what things set you off. So I would say, again, if you're in therapy, like definitely get a session in before, listen to that podcast before, read the book before, fortify yourself with skills. And again, even mental scripts of like things that you need to think, say, or do in order to help yourself get through that time. For people who struggle a lot with body image and food and are in recovery or are trying to recover, you know, from relationships with food that are complicated or really struggling, this is a very hard time. This is a holiday that is loaded with food, or, you know, Yom Kippur fasting. We are, you know, do not fast if you're struggling with an eating disorder. Like not even a question to go to a rabbi about. Like if you have an eating disorder, you should not be fasting. It is like actually not permissible to be doing
and
that.
That's any eating disorder. That's not just anorexic or restrictive eating disorder.
That's bulimia. That is, anything.
Binge eating disorder.
Yes, anything.
Okay.
So please do not fast. It is actually like against Jewish law because you are putting your life in danger. So do not do it. But I think that we need to think about, these times that we're at a table with loads of food and there might be comments, or it might feel stressful for you to be around that food. And so again, fortifying yourself with those skills that you need in advance. Be prepared. Write yourself some notes. Make voice notes for yourself to listen to beforehand. Do whatever you need before to kind of help yourself. And then even during, think about, what can I do to make sure, you know, that when I'm at the table, if it's very triggering for me and I know that being around that food and I'm eating, it might trigger a purge afterwards, or it might trigger a binge later on. What do I need to do to take care of myself? And that's going to be something that you talk about. Hopefully you're in treatment with your treatment team, your dietitian, your therapist, your doctor, whoever. But take care of yourself. I know a lot of people like to kind of block it out. Like, oh my God, I'm going home. I can't, I don't want to think about it. You think about it. You have to say, just like before we go on a road trip, we prepare with the snacks and the map and and we download the videos to watch, and we have the podcasts and the music, and we make the playlist. This is you preparing for the road trip. Get the playlist, get the whatever you need, have the tools available. Map out where the bathrooms are if you know you need a bathroom every 3 seconds. Do it. Take care of yourself. That is self-care. That is being responsible for your mental health and well-being. And don't just blame, oh my God, my family's impossible. I hate them. I can never go home. Maybe those are things that are true, but if you have no choice and you're going to be home, then you need to do what is in your power to make it as pleasant or as not painful as possible. So
I love that. I love the analogy of the road trip. That's really smart. I like that analogy. And I think sometimes we romanticize or glorify self-care and not realize that self-care is doing the responsible thing. It's not about taking that 45-minute bath or that, walk in nature somewhere far from your home. It's about being responsible. Like you said, having those go-tos, listening to the right stuff, having the affirmation if that's what you need, having that book at hand, making sure to meet up with that friend that you know is going to support you one of the days of the holiday, whatever it is. But that's self-care. That's not, just a nice thing to do. It's essential.
Yeah, it's preparedness. That's what we need. We need to be prepared, you know? So I think that's really important. Think about, what do I need for this mental road trip that I'm going to be on right now?
Totally.
And that's going to look different for everyone, by the way. Some people don't want to bring snacks because then they're going to have to go to the bathroom. Okay, fine. But think about what works for me. I need to prepare my own kit and do that.
Yeah. And then someone asked about, a few people asked about coping skills, but I think that's pretty much because it's harder on the holiday when you can't use social media, you can't use the internet, you can't use journaling. For the most part, I'm sure people could get Heterim for those things if they really need to. But I think, it really, like you said, it really is person specific, what works for you. For some people it's a snack, for some people it's not a snack, for some people it's a walk, for some people it's isolation or solitude, for some people it's a friend, for some people it's a book, So I think that again, to your point, knowing yourself, having that awareness, spending time enough with yourself before the holiday to prepare and get that awareness of what usually can get me through this type of situation, and then having those things at hand and picking and choosing in the moment what you think would work.
Yeah.
Someone said that they had a question. They put it in the question box. Let's see.
Oh.
What if you don't feel lonely? You're literally alone. So I think we kind of address that kind of thing, right? You don't feel lonely, but you're alone. So there's nothing. So don't shame yourself for being alone, essentially. And is that so terrible to be alone? And if you don't feel lonely, then enjoy the feelings that you have. they're
also,
positive.
is that something you can change? Can you reach out? And again, I think that people have a lot of shame associated with this. If I have to ask someone if I can come to their house, I'm such a loser. Here's where I would put in, by the way, if you know someone who you think might be alone for the holiday, please get on your phone and call them or text them or WhatsApp them and say, hey, where are you going to be for the holidays? Do you want to come to us? Can we have you for a meal? Please be sensitive to that you might have friends who are divorced or single or older or lonely. Please reach out to them. But again, maybe even be a little bit vulnerable and say, what feels worse to me? It might feel worse to you to reach out and feel like you're pathetic. But even then I would ask, where do you get that from? That asking someone if you can join them is pathetic and loserish. It's not. And it might actually be the thing that feels good for you. And you might even be happy that you did, that you were hey, are you guys around? Can I stop by after lunch? I'll bring dessert. Just trying to connect with people. You don't have to opt into being alone. You can say, I don't want to be. I want to call someone and ask if I can come. But again,
Afraid.
For
Yeah.
everyone else, please think about those people that might be alone and call them, ask them what they're doing.
Like everyone's so self-obsessed of like what their holiday is going to mean to them that we forget to like think a little bit outside the box and be like, is there someone that might be in a worse situation than I'm in that I can support? And I think that that's another point of like, one of the best feelings you'll have is giving to somebody else. So that's another way to like uplift your holiday. If you know that you're giving back, even if you're struggling with something, but you're giving to somebody else who's struggling, that can be a tremendous source of joy and meaning. And I think that's what we're all looking for. So this was amazing, Rachel. Thank you so much. I can't believe we literally covered everything in
I did not think we were going to.
You see that? You see that?
But you kept me moving. You didn't let me go on too long.
I don't know. I think you did an amazing job. I didn't have to work hard to stop you or cut you off. And this was amazing. I really think this was helpful to me, honestly, and I'm sure it was helpful to the people that asked these questions, because we really curated everything that you've asked and tried to deliver on that. So thank you again, Rachel, for being such an amazing therapist and mental health advocate. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and for trusting us. I think that's like a big piece, and I don't take it lightly. All right, and we're going to sign off now. Thank you so much again, and have fun. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.